All right, guys. Let's first talk about Netflix. Let's look at our levels from the Netflix in the pre-market. Let's do that first. What were the levels that we had on Netflix today? So the levels we had on Netflix today were 868 and 870. Right? Why was I interested in Netflix today? Let's see why was I interested in Netflix today. My interest in Netflix was basically because we had a big red day yesterday. You see that? So this morning it pushed over the clouds, and that's why my interest was to long Netflix this morning, because we had a big red day and I was just looking for a bounce. So so let's see what happens. So as soon as I see that pushing over 10-minute clouds, you see that it's pushing over 10-minute clouds, and that's why there was a curl long. Ideally, you long it, you watch it, you long it as soon as it breaks the resistance pivots. So that was a long. That's why I told everybody in the morning 334.50 curl longs. Around 875 levels. Your risk is 870. My target I gave was 885. 882 was my first target. Then 885. Then you see we pushed over the MTF clouds. That gives a little added confidence that we can push a little bit more higher. Then 888 was my final target. We didn't really get 888 fully, but we did push towards 880, 886. So it was a nice little trade for like $10 a share. And once it broke the 512s, you get out, or once it breaks the MTF, you get out, or you can hold as long as it holds 512. And then finally, when it breaks MTF cloud, you get out. You can also short it because it's MTF breakdown and it's a 512 breakdown, and you can short it as well back under 3450s for a nice two-way trade. But my main trade was in the morning. That was the Netflix long. That was a nice winner for us in the morning. Let's look at the next one. So next one we're going to look like right now is a Tesla. So what was Tesla doing this morning? So Tesla was basically just a scalp. It was not really any crazy trade because it didn't hold up and it gave up. So let's see what was the setup on Tesla. So setup on Tesla was this area. That's what was the setup. That was a flag breakout, but I did see strength on Tesla in the morning, and that's when because it was a defined risk, right? So it was a defined risk. When I saw this candle pushing over, that's when I said it's confirmed long versus 340 area, or you could put your stops under 339, right? And then we started to push, and we went into consolidation. We went into this nice little consolidation. But then Tesla made a breakout, right? This was the breakout. And let's see if I can show you here. So Tesla, that was a breakout, and then it pushed over the MTFs. Then it pushed towards 347. So it was not a bad trade from 342s, to 346s, $4 or $5, 70% on some of the lottos. So that was it for Tesla. It was kind of base hits on marketplace today. It was just a base hit play. But you can see the levels and the system. So Tesla 342, 344 were two resistance levels. But for me, once it was pushing over the clouds right here, that was long for me. And then you can see it's pushing over that. But once it's chopping right here, once it's kind of chopping right here, you see that it's tight, right? I mean, it's a tight action. You can't really do much there. You just put your stops and let it see. And you buy close to the clouds. You buy on these dips, and your stops is right under either this 338s, that's what I talked on the voice, or you can have your stops as it starts to push, makes higher lows, you can move your stops up. That was my live voice guidance on Tesla. And once it broke out of this flag, was a nice push to 347. You do not add here. This is not where you add. You add in this consolidation. Yes, maybe you can add a little bit here on 344, 345 breakout that I mentioned. Then we push to 347, you take most off, and once it breaks down, you just get out. Right? You don't want to, I mean, it's bouncing from 3450, but the main trade was this, if I go to 3-minute chart, you can have a better look. So the main trade was this breakout towards 347. Was just a nice little scalp in the community. You can see that my guidance, most of my guidance was on the voice. So we got some base hits on Tesla as well. Let's look at crypto stocks now. Let's look at MSTR first. So MSTR, initially it was a long. It was a long for us, but let's look here what we were doing on MSTR. So it was trying to push, but the long did not work. It failed. So we had to get out right there on MSTR. So there was nothing to do after that. When it broke under the clouds, it's choppy, choppy, choppy. But once MSTR broke this level, that was a pre-market low that so once MSTR is breaking these lows, then it becomes a midday short. Ideal short entries on these bounces, or you can put your stops right here or last previous high of the last 10-minute candle, and then you can let it fade. MTF is always the target. When it was breaking down under this level, I said 350 was the target I gave the community on the voice, but MTFs always act as a magnet, right? You see daily chart 20 EMAs and MTFs, and that's where you cover, right? And that's where you cover. And it did hold 20 EMA, and actually it's on a high watch for tomorrow because 20 EMA bounces usually gives us a small near-term bounce. So we'll be watching it again tomorrow, see what happens. That's a huge range on MSTR today. Definitely not a tight range. There was a lot of range from 400 to 340, $60 range. Good for scalps. Same for coin. Initially coin was long for us, but that kind of failed on us, did not really work. And then coin also broke out mid of the day. This was a midday short setup. Just wanted to recap that how to manage these positions, how to manage Mara and Bitcoin, all these plays. We keep eyes on the Bitcoin on a 10-minute chart all day. When Bitcoin is breaking and coin and MSTR are breaking, you don't need to hold them long. You just need to step away, right? So just wanted to recap a little bit of coin and MSTR. Not every day you're gonna get great movers on them. Today was a lot of choppy action. There was no trade until this broke down. This was the setup, MTF and cloud breakdown, nor this one. Why was this better setup? Because at the same time, Bitcoin was breaking down as well. So that was coin and MSTR. So Amazon was one of the best plays today in the community from the market setups. Reason being, there was a lot of flow coming on Amazon all day long. That was again one of my voice guidance that Amazon is really, really strong, really holding well. And it did break 512s for a bit, but then it reclaimed, and that was our 512 curls, and then it continued to push. I did tell everyone if they want to hold it, they can swing it, but this was what it was about, the flow. So we have our flow scanner. This is a ghost scanner that we have in the community. You can see since morning we were seeing this flow come in. Repetitive flow coming in, that gives you a little added confidence to trade these long setups. So that was that was Amazon. Just wanted to recap these market plays. These plays are dependent on the market. Market didn't really do much all day. Semiconductors were selling off, but Amazon was definitely one of the stronger ones. Amazon was strong. Microsoft was a super strong as well. If you look at the levels I gave in the pre-market, and MSFT was also, Microsoft also was an MTF long, right? So you see that they're breaking the MTFs and never broke 512s all day long. And you can see that there's an opportunity because you see that Microsoft is breaking out of the pivots I gave 420, 421, 8. And SPY was strong. Today, definitely the money was flowing into Mag 7. That's why SPY was strong. Microsoft was leading, Amazon was leading. So the money was rotating back into the Magnificent 7 today. So that's what was happening actually. Google was MTF bounces. So Google was MTF bounce. You could long here on MTF pullbacks. So this was the market today. I mean, definitely not a cleanest action apart from Amazon and Microsoft, but you could clearly see that Magnificent 7, Mag 7 are getting the flow. Other things are losing today, but Magnificent 7 was pushing higher. So that's how you identify the system. If you want to long, you long the morning push, you wait for the pullbacks, you add this 512 calls, just all repeatable setups. It was not like a crazy day on the most of these names, but definitely there was some kind of base hits you could make and make money. But as long as you understand where the money is flowing, you can find these opportunities. Let's go to the next one. Let's look at a few of our news plays. So we divide our plays as a news play, market plays, and all that. So if you see that, what was Abercrombie Fitch was doing? Let's go to our pre-market plan. Our pre-market plan on Abercrombie Fitch was, let me see if I can find that plan. Where is it? Oh, right here. Okay, so let's see. So you see that Abercrombie Fitch 155 was support, 150, 250 was support. My bias was initially bullish, but the amateur candle broke all the supports. All the supports broke here. So as soon as it broke under this level, I told everyone it's no longer a long, it's a short. ANF is a short, and it's another gap and crap, and bear flag breaking down, and ANF faded from like that 152 MTF levels, and it faded to like 143. Again, you could make $5-6 short, and of course MTF bounces, right? You see where it's bouncing from MTFs. So the morning trade was just get the short as soon as you see those levels breaking down, short it, take it down to the MTF, and get out, and maybe you can trade later in the day. But you see that there was no long in ANF. I hate this big push. It spoils the setup, but was definitely a short today, not a long. Big engulfing candle. If tomorrow we break these MTFs, we can get lower, but we'll use these MTF clouds tomorrow as well. So let's look at some other plays we had today. SMTC. SMTC was kind of a loser today. Did not really work. It broke under the MTF 3450 clouds at in the amateur move, but after that it didn't give any short, and you have to stop out right at when it pushes over the MTF clouds. You have to get out of that on SMTC. So that kind of short didn't work. You could long the 512 calls there, but it definitely did not do crap, gap and crap. I mean, it flushed in the morning, but adding here would result in a loser, so you have to stop out, take a $2 loss, and get out of that. So SMTC was a loser this morning. Let's go to the next one. Zoom was another one. That morning short did not really work. I tried to short it here, but it started to bounce. So we got out of the short, took a small loss on the amateur move. And then after that, it went into the chop. But then it did give a short. This is your short entry. This is where you buy puts. This second candle, you buy the puts, rejecting the MTF clouds. You put your stops above there. And I did mention that it's back bearish short, like at 10.14. And, nothing crazy. And it flushed from 83 to 81.50. You could scalp it a little bit. And then once it pushes over the MTF cloud right here, then I told everybody to exit shorts. Again, nothing A+, nothing crazy, but definitely there was a scalp money to be made here. So you see that I mentioned the MTF short on it, right? So that means MTF is what I'm using for MTF. I'm using to short it. So that was the best entry. I missed that entry. I was short in the open. I moved on to the other tickers, but definitely from 84 bucks, good entry is 84. 83 is all right entry, not the best entry. Went into the chop. It was not a good trade with the options. It was better with the shares, but it held the MTF rejections all day. We'll see what it does tomorrow, but definitely there was a base hits kind of day, but it was a morning loser for me. The reason it was a loser because I didn't have a good entry on the amateur move, and I didn't want to get squeezed over MTF, so I stopped out. But you could hit the next flush down here. All right, let's look at AMGN. So AMGN was a good trade for us. I mean, on AMGN we were looking for this curl in the morning only because it was not breaking under pre-market lows. My pre-market planning on AMGN was pretty clear. I was looking for on AMGN short the pops, but I also said cautious if it gets 512s. And 266 was a resistance there. So you see that it did not break down, right? So it's not breaking down here. It became a little bit bearish. It's hard to trade this flush. If you do trade, then you have to get out right out here. But this is where when the trade came, when it did a 512 curls, I sent a price alert of 262 512s curls alert, and then it pushed to 3450, which is always our first target. I told everyone still hold it. It's a 30, do not cut it. And since I said that do not cut it, it continued to push from 272s all the way to 277s. So it was, you see that this was a 512 curl setup that you could easily make like from 262s or even 263s. You could easily make 10 bucks per share or 12 bucks for a profit. The calls, some of the calls went 200%, the lottos, but this is how you manage your gap downs, right? If the short is not working, the reason I like it because of the range, right? 294s all the way down to 254s, that's a $40 range. Even if we can grab 10-15% of it, that's more than enough. And it actually retraced quite a bit. It retraced, if you draw the Fibonacci's, it retraced to 50 and it retraced right to the 61 Fibonacci. So use the Fibonacci's on those gap down reversals. This was the setup. This was finally a nice trade in the afternoon for the traders in the community. Let's look at few of other trades. We had gap and craps today. KSS was a gap down and fade short. The short from here. My target was 14. My stops were 512s. We were short on KSSS calls, but then it started to bounce from here. Didn't really get our 1422s, but you could make like 50-60 cents of profit here per share, risking 20-30 cents. And then it curled. This is where you get out. And that's when I sent an alert. That's a 512 test, and you could long it as well. And then this is a 512 long. You could make another back like 80-90 cents on that. So calls was a morning short, and then it was 512 calls, on that. All right, let's now look at a few of gap and craps. WWD was another gap and crap in the community. When it was breaking 3450, I said it's on watch for 3450. I said it's not breaking 3450 yet, so wait for it. And you see that it finally broke the 3450. Finally broke it, never got over 512s. This is where you enter, or even you can enter here, your stops right here. And that one, WWD, faded from 196 to 188, and finally it faded to the 188 and failed to curl and faded to the MTFs, right? So that was a nice gap and crap. Let's look at next one. This was another good gap and crap setup today. ADI, that was actually much better than WWD because ADI was no long. As told everybody, it's a gap fill. When I saw this rejections, and even ADI broke right here, you see that. And then I gave the 1 hour MTF target, first MTF, 1 hour MTF. From that ADI faded from 227 all the way to 216. It's easy, good one for the puts, for 100% on the puts. But you can see that I had a neutral bias on ADI in the pre-market planning. I said cautious if 512 breaks, and then it faded. When something goes under the gap, it can fade much more. So that's why I love the gap craps. A lot of range, beautiful trade. All right, next one we're going to look at is DKS. So let's look at DKS. DKS was another gap and crap in the community. I didn't trade it, but a lot of traders were guiding for that short from 3450 all the way to 210s. So that was a nice gap and crap. RGB was all over DKS today, guiding everybody through that trade. You can see that how you can see all the guidance, all the traders in the community. ABCD was on top of it. RGV was on top of it. Navy Wet was on top of it. Addy Money was on top of it. So you see a bunch of our traders really killed DKS short. 215 put went from 215 from 135 to 7 for the Navy Vet. So that's how you trade, guys. That's why you have this pre-market planning on everything. We had bullish bias on pullback to long, but once it breaks the clouds, there's no long. Our bullish bias is if the amateur moves hold this. There was no long. And once it breaks 3450, you short it. So nice guidance in the community by everyone. Let's look at the next one. So next one was GM. GM was a short. GM was a short because of that news from the tariffs. We have GM on our watch list. GM was right at the open. It was short right at the open. And so many opportunities, right? It was right at the open short. GM was a short and it faded all day.